Hello and welcome to Creative Community Television. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Stephanie Porcellato, and this is our third live chat in a series where we cover all things related to community TV and everything that goes into bringing it to your screen. Today's topic is cinematic style and the various techniques you can use to enhance the visual aspects of storytelling. So we'll kick things off with a discussion period followed by Q&A. If you have any questions for our cinematic style expert, please throw those into the chat for later in our show. So I want to welcome today's guest, Ben Jonah from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Hi, Ben. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Anin bonjour Stephanie. Kachishpaming wajib homage megaze henana dijnikas megaze dodum guli wikwe indonjaba ojibwe anishinaabe indao. Hi, my name is Ben Jonah. My spirit name is He Who Flies High with Eagles. I'm Eagle Clan, and I'm from Guli Bay, and I'm an Anishinaabe. And I am a producer here at Shaw Spotlight.
It's great to have you on today. How did you get involved with Shaw Spotlight?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have a TV arts class offered to me in high school. That got me interested in obviously making TV and making videos. And this is when there was no digital and like handy cams weren't even a thing. But I started volunteering at Shaw here and then went on to Canada College, took video broadcasting, and then I got a scholarship for MCTV, worked at MCTV, then went back to film school and advanced. I majored in advanced audio and cinematography at Sheridan, and then I won a national scholarship for Can West for Aboriginal people, and then that got me a position at Entertainment Tonight Canada with Can West. And then Can West went bankrupt, and then Shaw bought them. So, I worked for Shaw at Global Toronto for over a decade, and then pandemic hit and came back home, and now I'm just enjoying creating content.
You're back. Awesome. So we'll jump into today's topic, cinematic style. Could you start off by telling us defining cinematography?
Well, the term cinematography is derived from cinema photography and applying photography fundamentals to cinema and video. And if you look it up in the dictionary, it is the art of making motion pictures. So cinematography is applying photography principles to moving pictures, essentially. And you can apply it with sequences, visual storytelling, changing framing and depth of field, and yeah.
Okay, yeah, so some of the elements of cinematography there. Let's dive into those pieces further. So depth of field, you mentioned that. What is that?
Oh, depth of field. So looking at lens choices and aperture. So how you control your depth of field, there's shallow depth of field, and then there's like more depth of field. The term basically, if you look at my shirt here, this is like an f/16, so it only allows a little bit tiny light. And then down here, the lower your aperture, the more your iris opens and the more light it lets in. So there's a shutter speed factor for motion pictures, and most motion pictures are shot in 24 frames a second. And that cinematic look is the motion blur because of the slower shutter. And how you maintain that slower shutter, I'll put it up here, is with a neutral density filter. So this one here is an ND fader filter. So you can shoot wide open down here at 1.4, and it's like putting sunglasses on your camera. So in turn, like if you roll the video here, you can see that here I'm shooting at f/16. This is the same camera, exact same lens. All I'm doing is changing the iris and then rolling down the ND filters. So you see that creamy, wide open shallow depth of field that everyone's trying to attain. And here they are side by side. I did not move the camera. I just touched the iris and gave it more of like a shallow depth of field where you get that creamy bokeh. And bokeh is like those little wee tiny bulb lights in the background. And if you watch here, all I'm doing is F16 is opening up my iris down to 1.4, and I'm turning my ND filter, and I don't move the camera. It's continuously rolling, and you can see that the picture dramatically changes to a beautiful shallow depth of field shot.
Wow. And on to, let's touch on framing. So what is the importance of how things are framed in your shot?
Framing. So shot composition and framing is super important when you're out in the field and you're shooting. You don't want to shoot an interview where you're looking over here and I'm talking to you and most of my lead room is over here. It just doesn't look right. So if you roll the next video, we shot an indigenous pyrotechnician and it was in low light, so I was shooting wide open.
It was like getting ready for shows or preparing for shows. I got to be at this point, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, even physically, to be at that point. So
this is Donnie. If you pause it here or one of the brighter shots, because shooting in low light is super difficult. So I intentionally tried to frame him and all the B-roll inside this grid. So while I'm shooting, I'm visualizing this. This is called the rule of thirds. And there's been studies in photography of what is more appealing to your eye and works well with your brain. And it doesn't matter how or what you're framing, you can put your subjects in these quadrants of the frame. And as long as they're on those sides of the screen, the rule of thirds always make your images more appealing to the human eye. So applying fundamentals like that and using a bit of motion.
That's cool. I love the examples. It's super cool to see what you're talking about there. And what about environment? How do you use location?
So working in this business, there's pre-production and then there's just, okay, I don't know what I'm going to go and I don't know what the environment's going to be like when I'm going to a location. I worked in news for, 10 years, 12 years, and every location is different. So when you get to a location, I always take a walk around, right? And I always look for certain establishing shots or like a wide or like different things that can help tell the story visually, transitional shots and different ways to tell the story visually without, to accentuate and get the piece moving. Whether it's like shots of shrubs or shots of stuff hanging from a window or stuff that actually, helps you tell visually the type of person that you're talking to, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah, and could you talk us through establishing shots?
So establishing shots, this goes along with using your environment, right? I did a social media blast and asking for collectors, game changers, and people to feature for our spotlights. And I got sent this one picture of this kid. His name's Nick Ryan. His mom sent me this. You should profile my son. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. He's welding and he's making this giant metal skeleton. But if you play it and if you look, in the picture, you see a satellite dish with a light hanging from the ceiling. There's a Rick Ashley poster. There's a speed bag. There's all these little things, right, that help accentuate the storytelling. And this isn't some kid who's just in his garage, welding. He's got a personality. So I saw this sequence in my head, like, okay, there's more to it with this guy, he's not only welding and selling little metal art pieces, he's, I saw this sequence that you're going to see right now. I saw this in my head as soon as I saw that one photo.
I sort of inherited the garage. It used to be my dad's, and then he moved out. I tore everything down, made it mine. And then slowly over time, you build it into what works for you. In a garage, if they get coated in sawdust, all it will do is shake the sawdust off it. perfect. You look around for a few minutes, you'll see lots of weird stuff that doesn't look like it makes sense, but it does. There's always a reason for it. The satellite dish, it used to be on our roof, put a light in it and made it into an engine bay light.
So yeah, I mean, this kid's amazing, right? Like it just went on. Like the speakers hanging from the ceiling, he built out of insulation foam.
So it really adds so much more to like who that person is,
And
brings us to life.
In such a small space, like a garage, where he's welding at one spot in the garage, right? There's so many more different photos in there to shoot and use them as a sequence.
Yeah, for sure. And what about color? How does that affect the visual story being told?
So, newer cameras have a lot of dynamic range. Some of them are 10-bit, some of them are raw 12-bit, raw 16-bit. The higher, more crazy you get with cinematic cameras, cinema cameras, DSLRs, there's a profile called log, and it is to get the most dynamic range out of your images. And this is an example log, the way it looks when you're shooting it in the camera. So you have to grade it, but not only shooting sequences, right? I'm shooting in slow motion here with our friend Jane, but she's looking out in the window and she's not saying anything. I like shooting people not saying anything, because I hate when they're talking and there's lip flap. So you're shooting this beautiful sequence and you see this. So this is from years of experience and amazing people that I've worked with over the years, but you can create any sort of feeling of what she's going through, whether it's a hard time, if you keep playing the video, there's different emotions you can bring out just by using color. So this, is a feeling of hopeless with a different grade. Optimistic, she's hopeful, and then this next one, devastation, right? You can totally add and take contrast and adjust your pictures. And all she's doing is expressionless, pensive, looking out the window. And you can totally bring your viewer into any sort of situation just by this style of shooting, right? So whether it's a happy time, a bad time, and it's always the eyes. I love shooting eyes because they never lie, and it really brings into emotion, right? There's a beautiful depth of field shot there, but the plant had nothing to do with Jane. She's a chef, but I shot this sequence anyway just to have it. And this is an example of different ways to cut your footage together with a sequence.
It really says like so much without actually saying anything. You mentioned sequencing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So when you do what we do, we wear many hats. And if you're an editor and you're cutting someone's stuff and there's not enough shots, it could be quite painful. So I always go into kind of like the mindset of being a hummingbird. So I'll go and shoot literally everything. And I will shoot as many sequences as I possibly can with the environment that I have. And you need to shoot enough footage to tell a story visually. So, no planning. Like I said, like you'll show up to a scene or a location without seeing it. So you got to kind of work on the fly, and you kind of get good at it. And I have like almost like a template. So like there's the pensive, there's like walking, there's whatever, but there's different camera placement and movement. So this next piece of video is with a two-spirited drag performer that I shot, but it's like, don't be afraid to direct them too. Use a bit of humor to break down that awkward wall, because it's just you and this one person, right? So like establish a rapport, talk to them, make them comfortable. And then once you make them comfortable, you can direct them a little bit. And so, yeah, if you take a look at this next part from an older feature, you'll see the different type of sequencing. I'm using speed ramping. I'm using a gimbal for transitions. I'm using depth of field to get to the next shot. So you'll see these scene setter shots of like shrubs. You'll see Buddy walking to the where he's stopping, turning, and gazing out to yonder. But it all cuts together. And then when you add music will it keeps things moving. So check it out.
I know it would have made a big difference in my life if I would have been able to see a queer Indigenous person while I was struggling. Having that sort of mentor or someone to look up to would have made a huge difference for me, and I don't want anyone to have to feel the pains that I felt. And it is my responsibility to learn more about our culture and the teachings and knowledge, and then be able to go on and pass that down generations so it continues to live on.
So you see all those elements come together, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we see like how things flow together is important. The color there was also beautiful, and that's a key thing. Where does sound come in?
So, Stephanie, have you ever watched a movie with no sound?
It's not something I make a habit out of. Not typically. Not quite the same.
So video or cinematography or any moving pictures is an auditory medium. And I majored in advanced audio when I went to Sheridan in advanced television and film. So what we do to shoot these features in the field, you know, like you're not only a camera person, you're everything. So like you only have this one person's voice to help visually tell their story and hear them. But use sound to help carry your piece along. You know, whether, you know, I just shot an Indigenous stone carver, and he creates stone art and different pieces. So it was a perfect opportunity to incorporate a ton of like sound, right? Like you hear the scraping of the, you know, the stone, and you know, sound will help carry your piece. Whether you're making shifts and transitions to one scene to the next using those scene setter shots, but audio will always help you to make your piece breathe and keep it moving along. But that's also important. It's a battle that I fight all the time because I want to give these pieces time to breathe. But it's also like, okay, but you need this piece this long. So it's like, how do we tell this person's, you know, story, but carry it along and give it poignant pauses and letting it flow and letting, you know, the pacing carry it. And sound can help totally do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do all of these components come together in the editing stage?
So how does it come together? Well, the right tools. I mean, if you look at this, right? It's a cell phone on a little cheap gimbal. And this thing will allow you to do time lapses, give you steady footage for social media. You can do it at 16:9 for video. But the newer phones, they shoot 10-bit video. So if you notice, you'll see it in this next piece, but you'll see this phone is capable of shooting 10-bit. And it's a higher dynamic range of what typically you're able to see in a phone, even though you're restricted to lens, like a fixed, more depth of field, everything in focus lens. You can still do amazing things with the AI because like there's a cinematic setting where it manipulates and separates your subject. So using all your tools all at once to create sequences. For this one, I left my DSLR rolling to shoot a photographer shooting the beautiful ice caves and the ice formations of Lake Superior. It was amazing being out there. And I left the camera rolling. I kept this in my pocket, and I was piloting my drone. So I was getting sequences and flybys and orbits of this guy taking photos of this beautiful ice formation. And it's like, how many ways can I use these tools to create that cinematic look? And it all comes together in editing. So that's the drone shot. And I initially had a different shot for this.
By itself, let alone the biggest
And this is just the phone.
Sitting on the shore and just knowing that there's nothing else anywhere.
But color.
Like it. It's kind of what you live for. When I look for photographs, it's just composition. It's all composition.
So pause it here.
Going to those spots. Okay, try here.
So, okay, so that's my DSLR rolling. And then there's a time lapse. But the shot just before was shot with this phone. And you wouldn't think an image was possible, right? To get that
No,
amount of
yeah,
dynamic range.
yeah. No,
spots.
that's
Okay, try here,
incredible.
and then, yep, that looks good. Maybe I'll try.
So
go there,
it all
take a
comes
full
together, and I teed up.
just spending all afternoon getting a little bit rosy cheeked and cold fingers and just kind of enjoying it.
Wow.
So yeah, it all comes together with your storytelling and the tools you have. And if you don't have the tools, like I said, the best tool is the one in your pocket. And then, like I said, this gimbal is fairly inexpensive, but you can create so much cool content with something as simple as that.
Just with that, yeah, it doesn't like look like that at all, but it really is so. I don't want to say easy, but accessible. Just with what you've got, that's cool. Where do you find inspiration?
Where do I find inspiration? Well, like this is art. Every aspect of this is art. And whether you're out, doing camera work or getting sound, doing lighting, right? There's always an art to everything you're doing in every aspect of production. And that's what I love about it. But also, I'm Indigenous. And I've been pretty fortunate to have an amazing career so far, and have experiences and work with amazing people and work with mentors that are now friends for life. But now, working where I work here, I get to produce my own stories and produce them the way Indigenous storytelling should be told. So how I find inspiration is, like there was the apology and there was the Truth and Reconciliation mandate, but where does that lie and where does that leave our people? And I made it kind of like a point to, not just check a box, because I understand the history and I understand, what our people went through in the history of this country. But I also I want to give them a fair shake because it's not really understood, and the why. So there's stories of people trying to pull themselves out of intergenerational trauma, but it's not understood by the general public. And it's not just checking a box for me. It's really showing the good work of people that they're doing to pull themselves out of the terrible history. And I have family members that are affected by it. I'm affected by it. I've chosen to be sober, and this whole brand, is giving me the opportunity to be proud of the work that I do and be proud of, the storytelling, because our people need it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the art is important. Telling these stories is so important. So thank you for being that voice and bringing these stories to light and crafting them. And that is so important what you do. So thank you. We are going to move on to questions pretty quick here. But is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't touched on?
No, I mean, learn. I always tackle everything with, the aspiration of me not knowing nothing. We're all students of this craft, whether it's audio, video, all of this, editing, compositing, post-production, and work with good people. Here at Spotlight, we have a great team. We put our content out there internally to get feedback from everyone across Canada on this team. And, just knowing that constructive criticism is positive and not letting it get in the way of your ego, or there is no ego. It's not work when you're enjoying it, right? But in my career, I've worked with a ton of amazing people and mentors and that have helped me just kind of get to this level, and they're friends for life. And it's not work when you love it. So
Awesome.
I'm going to keep creating content and doing what I love.
That's great. Cool. Awesome. Okay, so we will take some questions. We probably only have time for a couple, but if we don't get to yours, please do throw those into the chat if you're tuning in live, and we will get back to you in the comments. So first up, Zoe asks, do you shoot the B-roll or interview first?
Well, it all depends. Again, it's scene setter, timing, time of day, and who the person is. If your person is apprehensive or shy, try shooting a little bit of B-roll first. Make them comfortable before, you go and talk about these really emotional things. Sometimes it does get emotional, right? And yeah, I think just establishing a rapport, you kind of feel it out. But I like to shoot a bit of B-roll first, because then it gives me an idea to get those scene setter shots, but also look for a great place to shoot the actual interview, and it gets them comfortable.
Awesome. Cool. Let's take one. This will be our last one. I think we're just about out of time. But Michael would like to know, what was your favorite project that you've ever worked on?
Getting paid to go to the Bahamas for course sales tourism. Bahamas tourism was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's one of those things where, if you love what you're doing, there's different aspects, right? We're students of life, and we constantly go and learn. And this job, and doesn't matter what company I've worked for, it's given me amazing opportunities, from going to cover UFC and major boxing fights to going to the Bahamas for tourism, and now, I'm my cup is full because I can tell stories the way they should be told from an Indigenous lens.
Well said. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've learned a lot. It's been so great to have you on the show and see all those examples of everything that you do. So thank you so much for coming on and teaching us.
Yeah, I could sit here and talk all day.
Well, if you do want more of Ben, please go check him out on his socials, just at the bottom of the screen there, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. I love teaching too. So that's part of our job at Shaw Spotlight. We go in and do workshops and work with students. So it's good to come in and talk about, experience and just the love of the craft.
Absolutely. On that note, if you would like to get involved in community TV, what we do here at Shaw Spotlight, whether it's in volunteering on a set or even creating your own show, visit shawspotlight.ca, the Get Involved page, to learn how you can come join us.